Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a season of waiting, where every door seems closed, every opportunity slips through your fingers, and every prayer feels like it's echoing into silence? You've prayed, you've fasted, you've done everything you know to do, yet nothing seems to move forward. The promotion doesn't come, the relationship doesn't work out, the dream remains just out of reach. And in those moments of frustration and confusion, a haunting question begins to whisper in your mind. Is God punishing me? Have I done something wrong? Has He forgotten about me? Today, I want to share something with you that might completely transform how you see your season of delay. What if I told you that the very thing you think is holding you back might actually be the hand of God holding you close? What if those closed doors aren't rejection, but redirection? What if that divine delay isn't about punishment at all, but about protection? What if God, in His infinite wisdom and boundless love, is orchestrating a pause in your life, not because He's angry with you, but because He's preparing you for something far greater than you can imagine, and more importantly, because He's protecting you from something you cannot yet see? The truth is, we live in a world that worships speed. We want instant answers, immediate results, and microwave miracles. We've become so accustomed to next-day delivery and instant downloads that we've forgotten the profound value of divine timing. We've lost the sacred art of waiting. But here's what I've discovered through years of walking with God and studying His Word. God's delays are not denials. His timing is not our timing, and His ways are not our ways. When God makes you wait, He's not being cruel. He's being careful. He's not withholding good from you. He's withholding harm. He's not saying no to your dreams. He's saying not yet, because He sees what you cannot see, knows what you do not know, and loves you far too much to give you something before you're truly ready for it. Before we go any further, I want to know something. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Are you tuning in from a bustling city, a quiet countryside, or somewhere in between? Drop a comment below and let me know your location. I love seeing how this community stretches across continents, cultures, and time zones, all united by our shared faith and our hunger for God's truth. And if this message is already resonating with your spirit, if you sense that God led you to this video today for a reason, would you do me a favor? Would you take just a moment to subscribe to this channel? I'm not asking this just to grow numbers. I'm asking because I genuinely believe that God has so much more He wants to speak into your life through the content we create here. Every week, we dive deep into biblical truths that can transform your walk with God, and I don't want you to miss a single one. Also, if you want to go even deeper and become part of our inner circle, consider becoming a channel member. You'll get early access to videos, exclusive content, and the opportunity to be part of a community that's serious about growing in faith. We're building something beautiful here, a global family of believers who encourage, challenge, and uplift one another, and I would be honored to have you as part of it. Your presence here matters, your story matters, and I truly believe God has brought you to this moment for a purpose. Now let's dive into these 7 signs that God is delaying you for protection, not punishment. As we explore each one, I encourage you to examine your own life with honesty and openness. Ask the Holy Spirit to reveal to you where He's been working behind the scenes, protecting you in ways you haven't yet recognized. Because sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as delays, and the most profound grace looks like a closed door. Sign number 1, you keep experiencing the same obstacles repeatedly. There's a peculiar phenomenon that happens in the season of divine delay. You might notice that every time you try to move forward in a particular direction, you encounter the same obstacle. It's like running into an invisible wall again and again. The job application gets lost. The funding falls through at the last minute. The timing never seems quite right. And it's not just once or twice. It's a pattern, a consistent resistance that makes you wonder if the universe itself is conspiring against you. But what if that's not what's happening at all? What if those repeated obstacles aren't signs of God's absence, but evidence of His presence? What if He's repeatedly blocking a path because He knows something about that direction that you don't? Think about it. When a loving parent sees their child about to touch a hot stove, they don't just warn them once and then step back. They intervene again and again if necessary, because they can see the danger that the child cannot perceive. I'm reminded of the story of Balaam in the book of Numbers, chapter 22. Balaam was on his way to curse the Israelites, motivated by money and prestige. He thought he was on the right path, heading toward success and recognition. But God knew differently. God knew that this path would lead to Balaam's destruction. So what did God do? He sent an angel to block the road, not once, but 3 times. Balaam couldn't see the angel, but his donkey could. And each time, the donkey refused to move forward, despite Balaam's anger and frustration. Balaam was furious. He beat the animal, cursed at it, demanded that it obey him. From his limited perspective, the donkey was the problem, the obstacle preventing him from reaching his goal. But the truth was far different. That donkey wasn't his enemy. That donkey was his protector. And when God finally opened Balaam's eyes to see the angel standing in the road with a drawn sword, ready to kill him, Balaam realized something profound. What he thought was an inconvenient obstacle was actually a merciful intervention. The very thing he thought was holding him back was actually saving his life. How many times in your life have you been like Balaam? How many times have you been angry at the obstacles, frustrated by the delays, convinced that if only these hindrances would disappear, you could finally move forward into your destiny? But what if those obstacles are angels in disguise? What if God is blocking your path because He can see the danger ahead, the trap waiting, the destruction lurking just beyond your vision? Consider this. Maybe that relationship that keeps falling apart is God's way of protecting you from a marriage that would have broken you. Maybe that business deal that keeps collapsing is God's way of shielding you from a partnership that would have bankrupted you, not just financially, but spiritually and emotionally. Maybe that move to a new city that never quite works out is God's way of keeping you exactly where you need to be for what He's about to do in your life. The repeated obstacles aren't punishment. They're protection. They're not evidence that God doesn't hear your prayers. They're evidence that He does, and that He loves you too much to let you walk into harm's way. When you keep encountering the same resistance, it's time to stop and ask, God, what are you protecting me from? What do you see that I cannot see? What are you saving me from by keeping this door closed? And here's something else to consider. Sometimes God repeats the obstacle because He's trying to get your attention, to redirect your focus, to teach you something essential before you move forward. Maybe He's protecting you from yourself, from your own impatience, from your tendency to rush ahead without seeking His wisdom and guidance. Maybe He's protecting you from the success you're not yet ready to handle, the platform you're not yet prepared to steward, the influence you haven't yet developed the character to carry. I've seen this happen countless times. People who fight against the obstacles, who force doors open that God was trying to keep closed, who push through resistances that were meant to redirect them. And years later, they look back with regret, realizing that if they had only paused, if they had only listened, if they had only trusted God's protective delays, they would have avoided so much pain, so much heartache, so much unnecessary suffering. The question isn't why is this obstacle here? The question is, what is this obstacle protecting me from? When you shift your perspective from frustration to faith, from resistance to receptivity, everything changes. You begin to see delays, not as denials, but as divine interventions. You begin to trust that God's timing isn't random or cruel, but perfectly calibrated to protect you and prepare you for what's ahead. Sign number 2. You feel an unexplained peace, despite the delay. This might seem counterintuitive, but stay with me. One of the most profound signs that God is delaying you for protection rather than punishment is the presence of an unexplained peace in your spirit despite the circumstances. You would think that if you were truly stuck, if you were truly in a season of divine discipline or abandonment, you would feel nothing but anxiety, fear, and restlessness. And while it's natural to have moments of frustration when things don't move as quickly as you'd like, there's something deeper happening beneath the surface. There's a peace that defies logic, a calm that doesn't make sense given your situation, a quiet assurance in your spirit that whispers, "It's going to be okay. God has this. He hasn't forgotten you." This peace isn't something you manufacture through positive thinking or self-talk. It's not a feeling you can produce on your own. It's a supernatural gift, a divine deposit that comes directly from the Holy Spirit dwelling within you. The Apostle Paul wrote about this in Philippians chapter 4, verse 7. He called it the peace of God, which transcends all understanding. It's a peace that guards your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. Notice what Paul says. This peace transcends understanding. It doesn't make logical sense. It shouldn't be there based on your circumstances, but it is. And its presence is proof that God is at work in your waiting. Think about it. If God were punishing you, if he had turned his face away from you, if he had abandoned you in your season of delay, would you feel his peace? Would you experience that deep, abiding sense that everything is going to work out, even when nothing in your natural circumstances suggests that it will? Of course not. The presence of God's peace is evidence of God's presence. And God's presence is evidence of his protection. I've walked through seasons like this in my own life, seasons where, on paper, everything looked wrong. The finances weren't adding up, the opportunities weren't materializing, the timelines weren't working out. But in my spirit, in that deep place where God speaks to us beneath the noise of our circumstances, there was this unshakable peace. It was as if God was saying, "I know this doesn't make sense to you right now. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but trust me, I'm protecting you. I'm preparing something, just wait." And looking back now, I can see exactly what God was doing. He was keeping me from stepping into situations that looked good, but would have been disastrous. He was protecting me from opportunities that glittered like gold, but were really just fool's gold. He was shielding me from partnerships that seemed profitable, but would have compromised my integrity. He was guarding me from success that would have come too soon before I had developed the character to sustain it. The peace you feel during delay isn't resignation or apathy. It's not giving up or settling. It's something far more powerful. It's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that your life is in the hands of a God who loves you perfectly, who sees everything, who knows everything, and who is orchestrating every detail for your ultimate good. It's the assurance that comes from trusting that his delays are not punishments but preparations, not rejections but redirections, not abandonments but acts of profound love and protection. Contrast this with the anxiety and torment that comes when you're truly out of God's will, when you've taken a path that God hasn't ordained, when you've forced a door that God wanted closed, when you've rushed ahead without his blessing. There's no peace. There's only restlessness, anxiety, a gnawing sense that something isn't right, that you're not where you're supposed to be. That's not the feeling of divine delay. That's the feeling of divine resistance. But in a season of divine delay, even though you might experience moments of frustration or impatience, there's an underlying current of peace. It's as if your spirit knows something your mind hasn't yet grasped. Your spirit recognizes that God is at work, that He's protecting you, that He's up to something good, even when your mind is demanding answers and your emotions are crying out for movement. This peace is also a form of spiritual wisdom. It's God's way of confirming to you that you're exactly where you need to be, even if where you are isn't where you want to be. It's His way of assuring you that the waiting isn't wasted, that the delay has a purpose, that He's using this season to prepare you, protect you, and position you for what's ahead. So pay attention to your peace. When you find yourself in a season of waiting, check your spirit. Are you tormented and anxious in a way that goes beyond normal human impatience? Or is there a deep, abiding peace beneath the surface frustration? If there's peace, that's God's confirmation that you're in His will, even in the waiting. That peace is His way of saying, I've got you, trust me. I'm protecting you from something you can't yet see, and I'm preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. Sign number 3, people around you keep warning you or things keep not aligning. Here's another significant sign that God is delaying you for protection. When you're trying to move forward in a particular direction, and it seems like every person you trust, every circumstance you encounter, every detail that needs to fall into place simply refuses to align, that's not coincidence. That's providence. God doesn't just speak to us through our private prayer time or through Scripture, though those are primary ways He communicates. He also speaks through the people He's placed in our lives, through circumstances, through the consistent pattern of things not aligning when they should. And when you're paying attention, when you're spiritually sensitive, you begin to recognize these patterns as His voice. Think about the story of Paul in the book of Acts. Paul wanted to preach in Asia, but the Holy Spirit prevented him. Then he tried to enter Bithynia, but again, the Spirit of Jesus wouldn't allow it. Door after door closed. Plan after plan fell through. From a human perspective, it must have been incredibly frustrating. Paul was a man with a mission, burning with passion to share the gospel, and yet everywhere he turned, he encountered obstacles and closed doors. But then something remarkable happened. Paul had a vision of a man from Macedonia begging him, "Come over and help us." And immediately everything aligned. The team concluded that God had called them to preach the gospel in Macedonia, and it was in Macedonia that some of the most fruitful ministry of Paul's life took place. The churches at Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea were all established because Paul followed the divine delays and redirections rather than forcing his own plans. What would have happened if Paul had ignored the Spirit's restraint? What if he had pushed through to Asia or Bithynia out of stubbornness or impatience? We'll never know. But we do know this. God's plan was better. God's timing was perfect. And God's delays were protecting Paul from wasted effort and directing him toward maximum impact. In your life, God often uses the people around you as His mouthpiece. That trusted friend who keeps expressing concern about the relationship you're pursuing. That mentor who keeps advising caution about the business decision you want to make. That parent who keeps sensing that something isn't quite right about the opportunity you're excited about. Yes, you need to use discernment. Not every opinion is from God. Not every concern is valid. But when multiple people you trust, people who love you and want the best for you, are all expressing similar concerns or warnings, it's worth paying attention. Proverbs tells us that in the multitude of counselors there is safety. God often speaks through the collective wisdom of the people He's placed in our lives. And when those people are consistently expressing concern or warning us about a particular path, when their counsel aligns with a pattern of things not working out, when their words confirm what the circumstances are already suggesting, that's God using them as instruments of His protection. I've counseled so many people who ignored these signs. They were so determined to pursue a particular relationship, opportunity, or direction that they dismissed every warning, explained away every red flag, and pushed through every obstacle. And almost without exception, they later came back with regret, wishing they had listened, wishing they had paid attention to what God was trying to tell them through the people around them and through the circumstances that refused to align. One of the most painful things to watch is someone forcing a door that God is trying to keep closed. They use leverage, manipulation, or sheer willpower to make something happen that God never intended. And for a while, it might even seem to work. They get what they wanted, the door opens, the deal goes through. The relationship begins. But because it wasn't God's timing or God's will, it eventually falls apart, often with devastating consequences. Here's what I want you to understand. When things consistently don't align, when people keep warning you, when you have to force, manipulate, or pressure situations to make them work, that's not just bad luck or unfortunate circumstances. That's God's protective hand. He's creating resistance to keep you from moving in a direction that would ultimately harm you. And conversely, when something is truly from God, when His timing has arrived, when His will is being done, things have a way of aligning almost miraculously. The right people appear at the right time. The necessary resources materialize. The circumstances fall into place. It doesn't mean there won't be challenges or spiritual warfare, but there's a flow, an ease, a sense that God is opening doors rather than you having to break them down. So pay attention to the pattern. Are you constantly having to force things to happen? Are you repeatedly ignoring warnings from people you trust? Are you explaining away red flag after red flag? Are you exhausting yourself trying to make something work that refuses to work? If so, stop, take a breath, step back, ask God what He's trying to protect you from. Ask Him what He sees that you cannot see. Ask Him to give you the wisdom to recognize His protective delays rather than fighting against them. Remember, God's love for you is so great that He will sometimes allow you to feel the frustration of delay in order to spare you the devastation of premature movement. He'll let you experience the discomfort of a closed door in order to protect you from the disaster that lies beyond it. And He'll orchestrate circumstances and speak through people to create a pattern of resistance that, if you're paying attention, becomes unmistakably clear. Stop. Wait. This isn't the right time or the right direction. I'm protecting you. Sign number 4, you're still growing and learning lessons. You need one of the most overlooked signs that God is delaying you for protection is that you're still in a season of necessary growth and development. The delay isn't random. It's purposeful. God isn't making you wait just to test your patience, though patience is certainly being developed. He's making you wait because you're not yet ready for what He has planned for you, and if He gave it to you now, it would either destroy you or you would destroy it. Think about the story of Joseph. From the moment he received his dreams as a 17-year-old boy, dreams showing him that he would one day be a leader, that his family would bow down to him, that he was destined for greatness. It took more than 13 years before those dreams began to materialize. 13 years of delay. 13 years of slavery, false accusations, imprisonment, and being forgotten. From a human perspective, it looked like God had abandoned Joseph, like the dreams were nothing more than the naive fantasies of a spoiled teenager. But those 13 years weren't wasted. They were essential. The boy who had those dreams wasn't ready to be Prime Minister of Egypt. He was arrogant, immature, lacking in wisdom and character. He needed to be broken, refined, tested, and transformed. He needed to learn humility in slavery, integrity in Potiphar's house, faithfulness in prison, and patience in the pit of being forgotten. Every experience, every trial, every delay was shaping him into the man who could handle the responsibility, power, and influence that his destiny required. When Joseph finally stood before Pharaoh, when the doors of promotion suddenly flew open and he was elevated from prisoner to prime minister in a single day, he was ready. He had the character to handle the power. He had the wisdom to navigate the politics. He had the humility to give God glory. He had the integrity to resist corruption. And most importantly, he had the perspective to see that everything he had suffered, every delay he had endured, was part of God's plan, not just for his life, but for the survival of entire nations. The same is true for you. When God delays you, it's often because he's still preparing you. There are lessons you haven't yet learned, character qualities you haven't yet developed, patterns you haven't yet broken, weaknesses you haven't yet strengthened. And if God gave you what you're asking for before you're ready, it would do more harm than good. I've seen this play out tragically in the lives of people who demanded promotion before they were ready, who forced opportunities before they had developed the character to sustain them, who climbed ladders of success only to discover they had leaned those ladders against the wrong walls. They got what they wanted, but they weren't who they needed to be to handle it. And the result was failure, burnout, moral compromise, and devastation. God loves you too much to set you up for failure like that. So he delays, he holds back, he makes you wait, not because he's cruel, but because he's compassionate. Not because he doesn't care about your dreams, but because he cares more about your character. Not because he wants to deny you blessing, but because he wants to ensure that when the blessing comes, you're equipped to receive it, maintain it, and multiply it. During the delay, pay attention to what God is teaching you. What patterns keep showing up in your life? What areas of weakness keep being exposed? What character qualities is God highlighting that need development? What lies are you believing that need to be replaced with truth? What fears are holding you back that need to be confronted? What dependencies have you developed that need to be surrendered? The delay is your classroom, and God is your teacher. He's not just teaching you information, he's transforming your character. He's not just adding to what you know, he's changing who you are. And this transformation, this deep work of character development, cannot be rushed. It cannot be microwaved. It cannot be achieved through a weekend seminar or a self-help book. It requires time, pressure, refinement, and patient endurance. Consider the metaphor of a caterpillar in a cocoon. From the outside, it looks like the caterpillar is stuck, trapped, wasting time in darkness and isolation. But inside that cocoon, a miraculous transformation is taking place. The caterpillar is being completely restructured, broken down, and rebuilt into something entirely new. And if you were to cut open the cocoon to help the butterfly emerge before the process was complete, you wouldn't be helping at all. You'd be killing it. The butterfly needs that time in the cocoon. The pressure and struggle of emerging from the cocoon is what strengthens its wings and prepares it for flight. Your season of delay is your cocoon. God is doing a deep internal work that you cannot see and might not fully understand. He's restructuring your thinking, rebuilding your character, strengthening your faith, deepening your dependence on him. And if he were to release you from this season before the work was complete, you might emerge with beautiful wings, but no strength to use them. You might step into your destiny, but lack the character to sustain it. So embrace the lessons. Lean into the growth. Stop fighting the process and start trusting it. Ask God, what are you trying to teach me in this season? What are you trying to develop in me? What am I supposed to be learning that I'm missing because I'm too focused on when this season will end? When you shift your focus from the duration of the delay to the purpose of it, everything changes. The waiting stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like preparation. The delay stops feeling like abandonment and starts feeling like an investment. God isn't keeping you back. He's building you up. Sign number 5. The timing of certain things would have been disastrous. Sometimes, we only recognize God's protective delays in hindsight. Looking back, we can see with perfect clarity that if certain things had happened when we wanted them to, if certain doors had opened when we were knocking on them, if certain prayers had been answered with a yes instead of a wait, the outcome would have been disastrous. I think of so many stories I've heard over the years. The person who desperately wanted a particular job, who prayed and begged God for it, who was devastated when they didn't get it, only to discover months later that the company went bankrupt or that the work environment was toxic. The person who wanted to marry someone specific, who was heartbroken when the relationship ended, only to discover later that the person they wanted to marry had severe character issues that would have made the marriage miserable. The person who wanted to invest in a particular opportunity, who was frustrated when circumstances prevented it, only to learn that it was a scam that would have bankrupted them. In these cases, God's no or not yet wasn't rejection, it was protection. His delay wasn't punishment, it was preservation. He saw what you couldn't see, he knew what you didn't know. And in his mercy, he closed doors, created obstacles, and orchestrated delays that saved you from outcomes you cannot even fully imagine. There's a story in 2 Kings chapter 6 that illustrates this principle beautifully. The king of Aram was at war with Israel, and he kept setting ambushes for the Israelite army. But every single time, the prophet Elisha would warn the king of Israel, telling him exactly where the ambush was planned so he could avoid it. This happened repeatedly until the king of Aram was convinced there was a spy in his camp. But there was no spy. There was a prophet who could see what others couldn't see. Elisha had spiritual vision that revealed hidden dangers, secret plans, and concealed threats. And because of this vision, he was able to protect the king and the army from disasters they didn't even know were coming. This is what God does for you in seasons of delay. He has vision you don't have. He can see around corners you can't see around. He knows the ambushes waiting on the path you're trying to take. He sees the disasters lurking in the opportunities you're pursuing. And in his love, in his wisdom, in his protective care, he creates delays that save you from outcomes you cannot foresee. The challenge is that this kind of protection often goes unrecognized and unappreciated in the moment. When Elisha told the king to avoid a certain route, the king didn't see the ambush he was avoiding. He just saw a detour, an inconvenience, a delay in his plans. He had to trust that Elisha's warning was valid, even though he couldn't verify it with his own eyes. The same is true for you. When God delays you, when he closes doors and blocks paths, you don't get to see what he's protecting you from. You don't get a vision of the alternative timeline where things went horribly wrong. You just experience the frustration of the delay, the disappointment of the closed door, the confusion of wondering why things aren't working out. And in that moment, you have to choose. Will you trust that God's delay is protection, even though you can't see what you're being protected from? This requires a level of faith and surrender that doesn't come naturally. We want proof. We want explanations. We want to understand exactly why God is making us wait and exactly what we're being saved from. But God doesn't always give us that level of detail. Sometimes he simply asks us to trust him, to believe that his love for us is so great and his wisdom so perfect that when he delays us, it's always for our good and his glory. I'll be honest with you. There have been times in my life when I was angry about delays. Times when I thought God was being unfair, when I questioned his goodness, when I demanded to know why he wasn't answering my prayers the way I wanted. But now, years later, I can look back and see so clearly that those delays were some of the greatest gifts God ever gave me. They saved me from relationships that would have destroyed me, from opportunities that would have derailed my calling, from decisions that would have taken me far from God's will for my life. And here's what I've learned. The delays that frustrate you the most are often the ones protecting you from the greatest harm. The closed doors you resent the most are often the ones shielding you from the biggest disasters. The unanswered prayers you're most bitter about are often the ones sparing you from outcomes you cannot imagine. So what does this mean practically? It means that when you find yourself in a season of delay, instead of just asking God, "Why aren't you giving me what I want?" you should also ask, "What are you protecting me from? What do you see that I don't see? What disaster am I avoiding because of your delay?" This shift in perspective changes everything. It transforms your relationship with waiting. It helps you see delays not as obstacles to your happiness, but as evidences of God's care. And someday, whether in this life or the next, you'll get to see the full picture. You'll understand why certain prayers went unanswered, why certain doors stayed closed, why certain seasons of waiting felt so long. And in that moment of revelation, you'll fall to your knees in gratitude, overwhelmed by the realization that God's delays were acts of profound love, that his "not yet" was the kindest answer he could have given you. Sign number 6, God is preparing something better than what you're asking for. Here's a perspective shift that can revolutionize how you view your season of delay. What if God isn't saying no to what you want? What if he's saying, "I have something better, but you're not ready for it yet, and it's not ready for you yet"? What if the delay isn't about withholding good from you, but about preparing something greater than you've imagined? The prophet Isaiah wrote, "No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him." Think about that. The blessings, the opportunities, the future that God is preparing for you are beyond your current capacity to imagine. They're greater than anything you could ask for or think up on your own. But here's the key. Preparation takes time. When you're asking God for something specific, when you have a clear picture of what you want your life to look like, it's easy to become fixated on that vision. You want that particular job, that specific relationship, that exact opportunity, and when God doesn't deliver it according to your timeline, you feel disappointed, frustrated, even betrayed. But what if your vision, as good as it might be, is actually limiting? What if God is saying, "I hear what you're asking for, and I love that you're bringing your desires to me, but what I have planned for you is so much better than what you're requesting. Trust me enough to wait for it"? This is what happened to Abraham. God promised him that he would be the father of many nations, that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. Abraham and Sarah waited for this promise for decades. When the waiting became unbearable, when their faith wavered, they tried to help God fulfill his promise through their own efforts. Sarah gave her servant Hagar to Abraham, and Ishmael was born. This was Abraham and Sarah's attempt to get what they wanted on their own timeline. But it wasn't God's plan, and it created complications and heartache that lasted for generations. Finally, when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, long past the age when having children was naturally possible, God fulfilled his promise. Isaac was born, the child of promise, the miracle baby who would carry forward God's covenant. And here's what's significant. Isaac represented something greater than Abraham and Sarah could have produced on their own. He wasn't just a child. He was a testimony to God's supernatural power, a demonstration of what God can do when we wait for his timing instead of forcing our own plans. What if the same is true for you? What if God is delaying what you're asking for because he has something better in mind, something that can only come through his miraculous intervention, something that will be undeniably from him and will bring him undeniable glory? What if your job isn't just to get a job, but to get the job that positions you exactly where God needs you to influence the people He's called you to reach. What if your relationship isn't just about finding someone to marry, but about finding the person who complements your calling and shares your passion for God's purposes? The better thing God is preparing might not just be a different version of what you want. It might be something entirely different, something you haven't even thought to ask for. It might be a completely unexpected opportunity that exceeds your wildest dreams. It might be a relationship, a calling, or an experience that you didn't even know was possible. But here's the thing about better. Better takes preparation. Better requires timing. Better demands that certain pieces fall into place, that certain people be positioned, that certain circumstances be arranged. You can't rush better. You can't force better. You can only trust that God, in His infinite wisdom and perfect timing, is orchestrating all things to work together for your good and His glory. During the delay, God is not only preparing the blessing, He's preparing you for the blessing. He's developing in you the capacity to receive it, the character to steward it, the wisdom to maintain it, and the humility to give Him glory for it. And He's also preparing all the surrounding circumstances, aligning people and opportunities in ways you cannot orchestrate on your own. Think of it like planning a surprise party. The person planning the party has to coordinate multiple elements: the venue, the guests, the food, the decorations, the timing, and the person being surprised doesn't get to see any of this preparation. From their perspective, nothing special is happening. They might even feel forgotten or ignored. But behind the scenes, someone who loves them is working tirelessly to create something beautiful, something that will exceed their expectations, something that will bring them joy. This is what God does during seasons of delay. He's working behind the scenes, coordinating elements you cannot see, arranging circumstances you're not aware of, preparing something that will exceed your expectations. And your job isn't to figure out all the details or to control the process. Your job is simply to trust that the one who loves you most is preparing something better than you could have planned for yourself. So when you're tempted to settle for less, when you're tired of waiting and you want to force something to happen just to end the discomfort of delay, remember this: God's better is worth waiting for. Don't trade His extraordinary for your ordinary. Don't exchange His miraculous for your mediocre. Don't settle for your good enough when He has His best prepared for you. The delay isn't punishment, it's preparation, and what's being prepared is better than anything you could rush into on your own. Trust the timing, trust the process, trust the God who loves you enough to make you wait for better. Sign number 7. You're being positioned for a purpose, bigger than your personal desires. Here's the final sign, and it might be the most important one. Sometimes God delays you because what He's preparing you for isn't primarily about you at all. It's about the people you're going to serve, the lives you're going to impact, the kingdom purposes you're going to fulfill. God isn't just thinking about your happiness. He's thinking about His glory and the people who need what He's placed inside you. This was true for Moses. For 40 years, Moses lived as a prince in Egypt, educated, privileged, powerful. Then after killing an Egyptian, he fled and spent the next 40 years as a shepherd in the wilderness. 80 years of preparation for a calling that, when it finally came, would only last 40 years. From a human perspective, that seems incredibly inefficient. Why did God need to delay Moses' calling for so long? Why not use him in his prime, when he was young, strong, and full of energy? Because God's timing isn't about efficiency. It's about effectiveness. Those 80 years weren't wasted. The first 40 years taught Moses everything he needed to know about Egyptian culture, politics, and power structures. The second 40 years stripped him of his pride, taught him humility, gave him time to encounter God at the burning bush. and prepared him to lead God's people not in his own strength, but in God's power. When Moses finally stepped into his calling, he was the right man at the right time, with the right preparation for the monumental task ahead. But here's what's crucial. Moses' calling wasn't ultimately about Moses. It was about the millions of Israelites who needed to be freed from slavery. It was about establishing a nation that would carry God's covenant forward. It was about demonstrating God's power to the nations. Moses had to wait not just because he needed preparation, but because the people who would depend on his leadership needed him to be fully prepared. The delay wasn't just protecting Moses, it was protecting the people God was going to entrust to his care. The same might be true for you. The delay you're experiencing might not be primarily about you. It might be about the people God is preparing you to serve. It might be about the students who will one day sit in your classroom, the employees who will one day work in your business, the congregation that will one day fill your church, the readers who will one day be transformed by your book, the clients who will one day need your expertise, the children who will one day need your parenting, the spouse who will one day need your partnership. God sees all of these people. He knows their names, their needs, their struggles, their potential. And he loves them just as much as he loves you. So he's preparing you not just for your own sake, but for theirs. He's delaying your promotion because he's developing in you the character and skills that the people under your future leadership will desperately need. He's delaying your relationship because he's preparing you to be the spouse that your future partner will need. He's delaying your platform because he's ensuring that when you do have influence, you'll use it wisely for maximum kingdom impact. This perspective completely transforms how you view delay. It's no longer just about you and God. It's about you, God, and all the people God is going to reach through you. It's about stewardship, responsibility, and purpose that extends far beyond your personal comfort and happiness. I think about the Apostle Paul. After his dramatic conversion on the Damascus Road, Paul didn't immediately begin his public ministry. He spent years in relative obscurity, being discipled, studying, growing, preparing. And when he finally began his missionary journeys, when he planted churches throughout the Roman world, when he wrote the letters that would become a significant portion of the New Testament, it was clear that every moment of preparation had been necessary. But Paul's ministry wasn't about Paul. It was about the countless people who would come to faith through his preaching, the churches that would be established through his leadership, the generations of believers who would be strengthened through his writings. Paul's delays were protecting and preparing not just him, but everyone who would be impacted by his life and ministry. So when you're frustrated by delay, when you're wondering why God is making you wait, ask yourself, who is going to depend on me when this season ends? What people has God destined me to serve? What purpose am I being prepared for that's bigger than my personal desires? How is God using this delay to develop in me the character, skills, wisdom, and anointing that future responsibilities will require? This shift in perspective moves you from self-focus to kingdom focus. It helps you see that your life isn't just about you. It's about God's glory and the people He's called you to serve. And when you embrace this bigger picture, when you recognize that your delay might be protecting and preparing not just you, but everyone connected to your future calling, patience becomes easier, waiting becomes purposeful, delay becomes a gift rather than a burden. God isn't delaying you because He doesn't care about your dreams. He's delaying you because He cares about His purposes and the people those purposes will touch. He's positioning you for impact that requires preparation. He's preparing you for influence that demands character. He's protecting you and countless others by ensuring that when you finally step into your calling, you're fully equipped to fulfill it with excellence and integrity. So, embrace the delay. Trust the process. Know that God is working not just in you, but through you, for the sake of people you haven't even met yet, for purposes you haven't fully grasped yet, for a future that's greater than anything you've imagined. As we come to the end of this message, I want you to take a moment and really let these 7 signs sink into your spirit. God is delaying you for protection, not punishment. Those repeated obstacles are angels in disguise. That unexplained peace is His confirmation that you're in His will even in the waiting. Those warnings from people and misaligned circumstances are His voice speaking. That ongoing growth and those lessons you're learning are essential preparation. The timing that would have been disastrous is being divinely prevented. The better thing He's preparing exceeds your imagination, and the bigger purpose He's positioning you for impacts lives beyond your own. Your delay is not your denial. Your waiting is not your punishment. Your closed doors are not rejections. They are all evidences of a God who loves you so deeply that He will protect you from harm you cannot see, prepare you for blessings you cannot imagine, and position you for purposes greater than your personal desires. So I want to encourage you today, stop fighting the delay, stop resenting the waiting, stop questioning God's love for you just because He's making you wait. Instead, lean into this season. Ask God what He's protecting you from. Ask Him what He's preparing you for. Ask Him what He's teaching you. And trust that His timing, though different from yours, is absolutely perfect. If this message has spoken to your heart today, if you've recognized yourself in these 7 signs, if you're beginning to see your season of delay through new eyes, I want to ask you to do something for me. First, subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a message that God might use to speak into your life. Every week, we're diving deep into biblical truths that can transform your walk with God, and I genuinely believe He has so much more to say to you through this channel. Second, if you found this video helpful, I want to encourage you to like it and share it with someone else who might be in a season of delay right now. Someone who's frustrated, confused, wondering if God has forgotten them. Share this message with them. Let them know that delay isn't punishment, it's protection. Your simple act of sharing could be exactly what someone needs to hear today to keep trusting, keep waiting, keep believing. And finally, take a moment right now to leave a comment. Tell me which of these 7 signs resonated most with you. Tell me what season of delay you're currently in. Tell me how this message has shifted your perspective. I read every comment, and I'm praying for everyone who engages with this content. You're not alone in your waiting. You're part of a global community of believers who are learning to trust God's timing, even when it doesn't make sense. Remember, the God who loves you perfectly sees what you cannot see, knows what you do not know, and is orchestrating every detail of your life for your ultimate good and His ultimate glory. Your delay is not an accident, it's not a mistake, it's not punishment, it's protection, preparation, and positioning for a future that's greater than anything you've imagined. May the God of all hope fill you with joy and peace as you trust in Him. May He give you patience to wait for His perfect timing. May He give you wisdom to recognize His protective delays. May He give you faith to believe that what He's preparing is worth the wait. And may He give you the assurance that you are loved, cherished, and held in the palm of His hand through every moment of delay. Go in peace, knowing that your waiting is not wasted. God is working even when you can't see it. He's protecting even when you don't feel it. And He's preparing something beautiful, something better, something worth every moment of patient endurance. Trust Him. He's got you. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.